Bom dia. Muito obrigada por virem hoje. Bem-vindos ao São Paulo Audiovisual Hub. Esse evento é realizado pela Secretaria da Cultura, Economia e Indústria Criativas do Estado de São Paulo e Lei Paulo Gustavo, com gestão e produção da APA, Associação Paulista dos Amigos da Arte, parceria do SEBRAE e apoio institucional da FAP. Nos últimos 5 dias, a gente fez dois laboratórios aqui dentro das atividades de capacitação do São Paulo Audiovisual Hub, em parceria com o TorinoFilmLab. Foram 2 laboratórios de Audience Design, onde nós tivemos 2 grupos de 6 participantes trabalhando numa estratégia de Audience Design de 2 projetos de longas metragens que nós selecionamos também. E foi uma experiência muito boa, tanto para os participantes, quanto para os projetos dos filmes que receberam, depois, no final, uma estratégia completa de Audience Design para os projetos deles. E aí, além disso, nós decidimos organizar 2 painéis em cooperação com o TorinoFilmLab. Ontem a gente teve um com a Sheila Culley, e hoje a gente tem um segundo com o Nicolo Gallio, que foi um dos tutores aqui de um dos grupos. Eu vou brevemente aqui apresentar o painel dele, que se chama O Ponto Cego Duplo, como estereótipos humanos e os preconceitos da inteligência artificial moldam nossa compreensão do público de cinema. And now I'm going to switch to English, so they also understand what I'm saying. So this masterclass examines the double challenge facing film marketing and audience design today, when the cognitive biases and stereotypes about audiences collide with the algorithmic, difficult word, Nicolo, assumptions encoded in AI tools and technologies like chatbots and large language models, and what we can do to identify them. So first, I would like to introduce you to Alessia Durante, the project manager of the TorinoFilmLab, so she can say a few words about Nicolo.
Thank you, Lydia. Bom dia, everyone. I'm very happy to be here because, as Lydia said, we have been working for a few days now with the workshop, and it was a beautiful experience to work with 2 Brazilian projects, and 12 AD trainees. I wanted to thank the São Paulo Audiovisual Hub Master Paulo Gustavo for taking us here and giving us the chance to work together, because at TorinoFilmLab, among all the other activities, we have been working on audience design since 2011. So we really care about audience design, and I hope you will enjoy the masterclass from Nicolo. Nicolo Gallio is a marketing consultant and audience designer based in Milan, Italy, and he has a PhD in film studies, and his main working field is training, but also consultancies for film festival, non-profit organization, and brands. He's a strategy consultant for the Berlin-based agency company Alpha Panda, but most of all, he's a TorinoFilmLab alumnus and also an advisor for the TFL Audience Design Funds. So I leave the floor to Nicolo, and I hope you can enjoy his masterclass. Thank you.
Welcome, bom dia. Okay, that's all my Portuguese, already out of the window. Thank you for coming. I know there is many things going on, super interesting, that I myself would like to join. So I appreciate that you are in this room instead of, going on to whatever it is. That's a cozy environment that we could get. I mean, we're not so many, so we can make it more of a conversation than a sort of a lecture. I know the topic already, so I got bored easily. You can maybe try to be as interactive as possible to make this more of a conversation rather than just a lecture sort of stuff. I guess I can try to understand if you yesterday by chance were here for Sheila's talk as well. Anybody? Yeah, a person? Oh, thank you, 3 people. Right, so basically I'm gonna, somehow make a few connection with what she was discussing yesterday, because as Alessia was saying, we spent like 4 days working on audience design with 2 projects, and it was like super interesting for me because I'm coming from Italy, first time in Brazil, and we have an understanding of a little bit of your project, the type of activities that you do here. And I used some of the concepts that I'm about to talk about with my teams as well. So for the ones of you who were here yesterday, you already heard about personas, and in the second part of the talk, we had one that we created. For the other people that are here and was not here yesterday, a persona is basically a portrait of an audience that we feel could be interested in the film that we are working on. When we start to brainstorm around audiences and we have zero understanding of who the potential audience for a project could be, some of the tools that we use is like creating this fictional but based on reality portrait of the intended audiences. We have many, depending on the type of audience and the segment that we want to reach. And the persona exercise or the persona template is not originally conceived for the film industry. It's been used since forever. I've always heard about that in business schools, marketing, and of course in audience design as well. So we don't necessarily use something that is specific for the film to brainstorm around the audiences. And you can use it if you want to open a restaurant. You can use it if you want to even change your job, just to understand what is that you are in the moment of life, or for your business, that you try to figure out what is the potential segmentation for the market or the potential people interested in your product or service. So with that premise, for me, is important, because when and every time I talk about audiences in the film business, but I assume in cultural and creative industries in general, there is this conversation around audiences that normally happens very late during the process of the creation of a film, whereas in other contexts, for other products or services, the concept around the audience is there since the beginning. And that is the main difference, that normally when I was working outside of the film industry, I was finding it pretty much interesting and unique of what we do, because in every other context that I work on, the audience was at the center of everything, or the audience-centered approach to understand the potential, people interested in what you do was there since day zero. Whereas in the film business, more or less happens around the festival trajectory, because then is where your film is about to get to be known to the audience. So that's the premise for today. How many of you are just from the area, like Brazilian and or neighboring countries? All of you? Okay. That's important to know, because sometimes this topic can be wildly different depending on the country that we are talking about. So that is much more based on what I normally do for European project, but also for the work that I do with your project in development and in the context of workshops, such as the one that I've been working on the past few days. Why is different? Because as the title says, we are talking about human beings, meaning we all have our brains work in certain ways that supposedly is universal, actually is very much rooted in the way that we've been born and raised. And so talking about biases and stereotype and prejudice can be very much different depending on the country that we are considering. Now, things are getting more complicated, because when artificial intelligence gets in the dynamic of work and private life, when we use this technology to brainstorm around the public that you want to reach, now we don't really understand the, so to speak, point of view of these platforms, meaning that we don't have access to the data set, we don't know how they were trained, etc., etc. Very often in the context that I work with, that's not even a conversation. People don't care if they don't understand why a chatbot tells you something, as long as it tells something, right? And that's the problem that I'm seeing very often in the film business specifically, but in general. Talking about this more in detail in a few minutes, but for me it's important that we start to think about that these biases are at the same time, so to speak, going across every type of activities that we do. And then when we think about, we focus on the film industry, they kind of show up in ways that are specific of us as spectators, as filmmakers, writers, producers, etc. Now, what I also want to point out is, first off, I want to ask you, do you know what is a blind spot? How would you define, do we have a mic already? Somebody, can you define a blind spot for us, please? Sorry, say it again, please. Okay, I'll tell you, a place where you can't see, exactly. So you might have experienced that when you drive your car, right? At some point you lose focus on what is in a certain space that's normally is there, like I'm not seeing my own slide, so to speak. And that is somehow important as a metaphor, like when we brainstorm around audiences, sometimes we lose focus on what is important and we try to guess. And the effort that I'm doing with the project that I'm working on is when a filmmaker does have some ideas around audiences, that's fantastic. When they don't have any ideas, that's also interesting. But when we start brainstorming around that, at some point when we create these portraits, a filmmaker typically, or a scriptwriter, starts to create them as if it's a fictional character, right? Because that's what they normally do. And that's not how it is supposed to happen. And the blind spot there is when we don't have enough information and we are filling these, portraits with something that we are inventing, basically. So we are losing the focus of what we know and we are putting together some sort of fictionalized version of our audience. And that when is supposed to enter into a different conversation. Like we are just inventing stuff, we are not based anything more on data or things that we know. All right, so enough for the premise. That was the long premise to the whole thing. I just add a couple of things about myself just because it's important to contextualize what I do. So as Alessio was saying, I work across audience design and marketing. Nowadays, I don't differentiate that anymore. For me, the way that I do marketing is very much infused by the way that audience design was a moment for me of training. Like I did the same kind of workshop that I've done with your colleagues here in 2012. Like I consider myself as sort of old guard type of audience designer. Gives also away my age, sort of. But it didn't change as an approach. It changed a little bit of the way that we structure it around what is going on in terms of technology available to understand audiences better. Another premise that I have to do is, as you see here, I'm not a computer scientist as training. I have a different background. So my PhD is film studies, and back in the day I was studying what audiences were doing to film, like even weird stuff when they were, dissecting films and creating fake trailers and mashup and changing the tone or something to make it something more funny, even if it was like a serious type of story. So I was interested in what they were doing beyond just liking a film because of the genre or because of the story. And nowadays what I'm seeing is like, it reminds me of that. There is a fringe in the area of people that love cinema, that they are kind of doing the same thing, experimenting with AI, and that is on the creative side. On the strategic side, that is the one that I work on mainly, I'm seeing film team, and with that I mean producer, writers, directors, co-producer that I work on using AI very casually, but on a regular basis. So I have zero interest in AI, so to speak, until my clients started to using it. So I have to understand why they were doing what they were doing, and if they were using it in a way that is like a schizophrenic, so to speak. What I mean by that is there is a line when you work with AI that film team don't want to cross, and is usually the one that involves giving or feeding these machines with a script, right? So the script is somehow considered a sacred thing. They don't want to mess with, technology. But for everything else, AI is everywhere, right? And they have no issue in uploading super sensitive documents into ChatGPT, for example, without even knowing how to protect the privacy of the document. They create their own internal document without, making them, so to speak, anonymous. So they input everything there. But the only thing that I don't want to put there is the story, somehow. And that is an interesting fact to me. I also wanted to ask you, do you use AI in any form or shape? Just raise your hand if you tried some AI tool or technology. Okay. Which one? Just, a round of, names or tools. Midjourney. Okay, so image generation. Perfect. Anybody else? DeepSeek, Claude, ChatGPT. So basically these are three versions of what we call nowadays chatbots that are trained on large language models. And so probably the one that is very much common for many of us, even in our private life, is that type of artificial intelligence. Now, that is a very specific, kind of general use. There are, for the film business, specific platforms that without mentioning names, but in Europe we have businesses that created AI first type of technology to serve the film team by, being able to compare the film that they're working on with hundreds of comparable titles, making prediction about box office results, analyzing all your assets, so to speak, such as stories, themes, topics, your cast, etc., etc. And they are somehow forecasting your success. So that is something that is way more advanced than the chatbot that we are mentioning. They come with a different cost, of course. Not everyone can afford that. You can use AI by hiring agencies that have a mixed approach to audience analysis, such as AI for analyzing large data set, and at the same time having, for example, digital anthropologists that work with human beings to compensate for what the machine are creating, right? So, but these are much more advanced services. Just if you never heard about that, they exist, okay? Now, today, I just focus on stuff that you probably have tried, and these are the chatbots that I've mentioned, because that's also something that I'm seeing in my workshop. It's pretty much interesting what I have been observing the past few days. When I work with project and I have a team of people in training with me in the room, and I ask for benchmarking a story. Like benchmarking means we have to try to understand if a certain type of story has already been told, and what are the differences between the projects that you are making compared to the one that are already existing. So just 1.5 years ago, probably, if I was saying, now we do benchmarking, everyone was going on Google, right? Now if I say it, half of the room goes on ChatGPT, goes on Perplexity, which is a similar service, okay? So I already noticed that using AI is becoming more and more kind of second nature for many professionals that I work with. So again, one of the reasons why I have to be interested into that is because that's already not even a conversation anymore. It's a tool that is taken somehow for granted. Now, when we get into this dynamic, when we have human beings and we have machines working together, some of the things that happens is we are in this landscape somehow, right? So we are supposed to know the audience better, not just because we are necessarily interested for that, but because we feel like if we know the audience better, we are more effective in trying to reach them, meaning we are more effective in marketing films, we are more effective in having audience design approach around that, etc., etc. Now, what has not changed in the past, couple of years is we don't have more time as human beings, so we are still like working with our lives, we are super busy, etc., etc. So for people like myself, we need to understand what has been changing, if anything, with technology, and what is this affecting the type of work that I do. Like, for example, I can still work with people that are envisioning their own audiences as someone super busy in their lives. They have very limited time to dedicate to, let's say, entertainment in general, but let's say film experiences, because it means that they still have a couple of hours to dedicate to, that, but it's competing to anything else that is a hobby, an interest, their private life, their families, etc., etc. So AI is complicating the things on a higher level because it's being creating more and more content. And AI here, I'm considering the word in a very wider terms, such as social media operate with AI, right? So algorithm that video content on your preferred social media channel, it's working through AI. That's machine learning. It's a different type of AI. It's not generative AI. It's not the one that we work with ChatGPT. But for even for the people that say, I will never touch AI, it doesn't matter. AI is already in every device that you use. It's already like in your television, it's in your laptop. You cannot sort of decide that you don't want to engage with it. You should get out of Google Maps even, because that is also AI. Because that is, somehow saying, okay, we cannot use it if you want. I don't think you can anymore. But what is happening is there is more and more content. That's normally a slide where I project facts and figure and scare you by making it, somehow convincing that it's impossible for a film to even reach a person somehow in the world. I remove it because it's too much depressing, but, I keep the context as we produce a lot. We cannot consume everything that we produce, in general in life, but in the film industry specifically. And the problem is the attention span that we have is being reduced and reduced. Now, for the context of working with AI, that is super important. Why? Because when I ask my trainees to do this type of research, try to understand if there is data around an audience in a country, does your government release facts and figures about what is that is the audience in this specific place, who are going to film theater anymore, etc. Their own attention span is very scarce as well, meaning they are supposed to engage with research that is complex. They are supposed to search for reports, stuff that is coming from audiovisual observatories and things like that. They don't do that anymore. They jump on ChatGPT and they ask ChatGPT, what is the Brazilian standard art house audience for a film like this and that? And that is the research, so to speak, that I normally get, right? So the problem with that is, I would say months ago, even 1.5 years ago, the context of what you get when you do this type of research is wider than the context that a chatbot gives you back when you have this type of general question. Meaning that you were forced to kind of dig a little bit, and instead now you just take for granted what the chatbot is creating for you. The problem is we don't know where these data are coming from, and even when a chatbot gives you the link to double check what it's saying, now we don't do it anymore because it's faster to get the answer, and double checking and fact checking everything takes a lot of time. So that is the context that I'm working on. I have to take into account that what my film team are doing is this type of activity, and I have myself to double check everything that I get from them. In a traditional context, for example, when I work on figuring out what it is an audience for a film, it normally can happen because a film team wants to apply for funding, right? And so they are supposed to provide answers to questions such as, what is the audience that you are addressing with the story? What is your marketing plan? What is your distribution route? And whatever. So they are very specific questions that they don't actually know what the answer is. I'm supposed to help them, of course, but they are trying to give me draft of paragraphs that are filled with information and stuff like that. And when I ask them, where are you getting this information, is normally the answer is, I asked ChatGPT, right? The problem is that ChatGPT sometimes does it right and very often does it very wrong. And there is no in-between. Sometimes there is no in-between anymore. Okay, so that's the premise, another long premise to this. The question would be for us, okay, we don't know anything about our audience, where do we start? And the starting point would be creating this brainstorming session when we go through understanding what is the potential look like of a person that we feel like could be interested in our film, could be. That's the persona exercise that you saw yesterday, and that is the one that I'm discussing in the next few minutes. The persona exercise, though, it's a tool, right? It is not the universal answer that you get. It's a tool to work with a creative person that has never considered what the audience is. So we need to have somehow a common ground to start with. And the common ground is asking themselves to put themselves into the shoes of a persona by creating this fictionalized portrait. What normally happens is it's a Frankenstein of different people that we know, and we put together elements from our parents, our friends, our own belief systems, etc., etc. So a persona comes out as a mix of different people that we kind of think we know, and that is normally a good place to start. Is never a place to end our conversation, and is made of demographic details, is made of psychographic details, which means like the behavior of a person, and not only that the person is living in a big metropolitan area, has that age, is married or not, has kids, etc. But it also has a set of values, and normally have to double check what is the thing that we are working on doing for them potentially. What is the connection, the emotional connection that we can establish with that. Now, we then go into all this benchmarking, and we try to understand if a person that already watched 3 stories that are similar can still have an understanding to wanting to know more of certain topics. Sometimes that is very true for the project that I work on when they are fictional, but also documentaries, right? Documentaries very often are based on events, and oftentimes what you're trying to describe with your project has been already told many different times, and we need to understand, is there still an interest for that? And we try to do that with the persona exercise. Now, the starting point is also where problems are getting very quickly, they present very quickly, meaning that in this exercise, we inject a lot of biases, and we assume a lot of stuff about people that we don't really know, people that we think we know, etc., etc. Now, that was already a problem in itself. When we also introduce AI, we double down these problems. And AI also comes with their own biases, assumptions, and prejudice. If we don't know how AI works, that is doubling down the problems, because we cannot compensate for that. We are human beings, and sometimes when we reflect on how we like or dislike certain stories, we can try to understand, okay, is that because I don't like the genre? Is that because I don't like how the writer is writing about it? So you can try to, self-correct for that. When AI is in the mix, you don't know how to self-correct for what AI is saying about the potential audience for the story that you are developing. So that is problem number 2. And the result is a component bias, so to speak. That's where we start. We start with the human bias, and then we delve into the AI bias. So I'd like the takeaway for this talk to be reflect upon everything. When we start reflecting upon audiences, reflect about how you envision that, why you do that, and then if you use artificial intelligence, reflect about why do I do that with a chatbot, and why can I do it myself anymore as a human being? Because that's already a thing. My first question would be, why do you need AI in the first place? Sometimes maybe you don't need it, but you look around and everyone is using it, and so you feel like that you are missing out something that is important. Sometimes you really do it. Like sometimes you can have a companion that helps you out for a while, you copilot, so to speak. But the things that I'm seeing is that people want to work with AI because AI always want to kind of please you somehow. And the conversation that you have with creative teams and with real people sometimes have friction. And that friction is like, sometimes it's very useful because friction allows you to understand why is that I'm seeing things in a way that other people in the room are not seeing similarly, right? And that doesn't happen with AI. With AI, it aligns to what you want to hear from it. And that is missing part of the discovery process. Like you input stuff and you get an output. There is not anymore a conversation. It's just this, you know, in and out type of thing that happens. Okay, so human beings, brains, specifically, they have a way to work that deals with processing big chunks of information. And the type of work that the brain does is filter down data, filter down information, and it filters down the outside world to make you understand very quickly what is the decision that you have to take, what are the risks, the parameters, and it provides shortcuts. Like essentially, what we mention as heuristic that you read there is a synonym for shortcut. And what the brain does, it helps you to take shortcut, to be more efficient in your daily life. We do it constantly, right? One way to look at what we call cognitive traps, so to speak, the way that the brain tries to help you, but actually sometimes it tricks you, is exactly like this. And we probably have experienced something that is similar to that list. Like confirmation bias, for example, is where we search for information around the world that confirms the way that we see the world, right? And that is manifesting very often in bubbles. Bubbles such as this one, that's a bubble, that's an industry bubble, and that is an example. Your social media feed is a bubble. We are in bubbles constantly, right? Sometimes we don't realize that anymore, except when you start to speak with someone that is not in the same bubble of yours. And then you start to see the world differently because it's not having the same information, and you start to question, okay, I thought that everyone had that vision about that something, but it's not true anymore. All these biases goes across your daily life without even realizing that. I want to contextualize some of these for the film industry, so it's maybe easier for us to see how they translate into what we do. So social proof, for example, is when we are looking for information that are supposed to not only confirm as confirmation bias what we want to do, but they are supposed to be these are supposed to be information that allows us to take decision based on what we feel like other people around us are thinking or talking about. Like a type of social proof that we use in film business, it's totally in marketing, when we are giving you as an audience a set of nice reviews from the press, a set of nice comments from other people that saw a film, so that you can say, oh, that's probably interesting for myself too. It seems to have, you know, a good feedback from kind of everyone. I want to know that if still a film that is relevant for me, maybe I want to watch it, like social proof. Connected to that, it's herd behavior. Like we human beings, we were engineered to move in packs, to have villages, to have small groups, social tight connection. And we pay a lot of attention to what is going around us, right? So herd behavior is like to say, we want to know what is in the know of my social circle, so to speak, because I want to also be in the conversation. Like if there is a film that everyone talks about, maybe I really want to watch it because so that I can also talk about, right? I'm not missing information and I am watching something that is the hot stuff. Also, that is super popular in marketing. All this works two ways. On the audience side is when you are exposed to that, your brain works around this information, etc. And marketing leverages that, right? So you have, so to speak, a type of marketing that uses that ethically, and a type of marketing that sort of does it in a gray area. like when they really want to subliminally suggest stuff. They work on the same parameters, right? Choice overload, you probably have experienced that, again, within the film industry, you are in your preferred platforms and you are scrolling down, searching for something to watch at night, and there is so much stuff there that you ended up after 20 minutes not watching anything, right? And that is also something that we've seen so more often. So you experience that probably also outside of digital platform, like when you are supposed to pick a film in a film theater. Give me an understanding of how you choose a film, for example. Not on a platform, like you want to go out for a film theater night. What is the driver for you? Why you? What is the type of thinking around picking a film as opposed to picking another one? Is it a genre? Is it a theme? What is that? Recommendation from circle of friends, family, who is more interesting for you to listen to for recommendation?
Known people. I think it might depend. Maybe someone who's closer, or maybe someone who is known for making film reviews. It depends.
Okay. Is it also still the case that you like rely on a nice review from a film journalist, for example, or you are much more into, you know, people that you know physically, really?
I think nowadays it depends, because our feeds we are in contact with people who are close to us, but also people who are all over the world. So I think I don't know, I might be eclectic.
Yeah, no, that's nice to know, because of course in marketing we need to understand, are we still doing things nicely the old way, or are we supposed to go for letterboxes review rather than putting the the top film critic for that magazine? What is more effective nowadays? It's still in between, in my expertise, at least in my experience. Anybody else choosing films with different parameters, like instead of being a recommendation or word of mouth, is there something that you feel like I'm much more inclined to decide by poster design or genre or themes?
Normalmente eu levo em conta tanto o local, o cinema, a curadoria daquele cinema, tanto quanto o gênero do filme ou a equipe, né, o diretor ou o elenco.
Okay, that what I got out of my poor Portuguese, like name of directors and the genre, etc. Exactly, like these driving factors are still very much important. Just be aware that every type of choice that you make cuts across some of these. Like we kind of mapped, I guess, 200 type of biases and these dynamics. So you are not someone who's not experienced that, although you think you are, somehow more aware of it or better than anybody else in the room. We all are subject to that. Like one thing that, for example, AI is bringing very clearly in the conversation around creative industries is the status quo bias. What does it mean? We as human beings, we operate within uncertainty, so we know that we want to have some certain points that are fixed for us. We don't want to be challenged all the time. We don't want to make changes in the way that we operate and behave. And so when you have that is the status quo bias. We want things like more or less that stays the same. That is AI getting in and disrupting everything. And that is revealing a lot, not just about what is that this alien technology is doing, but what is forcing us to change in the way that we work, in the way that we operate. Now, if you're a film professional, for example, you are told you need to upskill. You are told you need to integrate AI. You are told that you are lagging behind if you don't know it. You are told that you are giving away opportunities in increase your production if you are not using it, right? So there's this push that is like pushing the technology towards you, and in the technology that is adopted by the audiences is the same. We feel like we need to engage with it because we are missing out something. Again, it's connected to her behavior, but it's also status quo that is saying, okay, I don't want to engage with it because it forces me to change the way that I see the world, that I operate, and I don't want to really, I'm 45, I don't want to get into a different job that also requires me to understand how AI operates, etc., etc. All right, so that is more or less going across a few of these biases. If you are interested, you can just Google list of biases and you will discover a world that is probably opening new ways to understand how you operate as a human being. Now, there are some of these that I want to mention that are specific for the film industry, and they are totally informing the conversation that I have with clients, partners, etc., etc. So one of my favorite is the art film versus popular film dichotomy, like when you are supposed to pick sides. And as a film professional working in art house, I don't know how the type of film that you are created, but in my usual conversation, I work with indie filmmakers or art house filmmakers. It's much more author-driven type of cinematic storytelling, right? And for them, it's like almost a religious choice that they make to kind of fight against big blockbusters, to provide alternative experiences to big commercial film, etc. Now, when I was a film student decades ago, I was also always asked, what is your favorite type of film? And people couldn't understand why I could enjoy action films and at the same time watch Federico Fellini and having Tarantino and having Michael Bay. If it makes sense for you, Michael Bay, it's been a while. I could enjoy Transformers as much as I could enjoy in silent film. But for many of my peers, even at university, they couldn't understand why I couldn't decide if I wanted to enjoy this indie and author-driven stuff or going fully US-oriented. But that is not something that we are obliged to do, right? We can enjoy different things for different reasons. But in my line of work, that is one of the still most common, false dichotomy that I have experienced on a daily basis. Now, one that I like particular, when we create personas, for example, everyone that starts to brainstorm around art house audiences and author-driven filmmaking is like targeting people living in big metropolitan areas, very well educated, mostly women, 60 plus, because somehow they read about that there is the target audience for that type of films, and they go for it without even questioning. And when I ask, okay, it's still valuable in your country, where do you get the information? Nobody can answer the question, right? They heard about it maybe in a workshop like this, someone told that, or they read somewhere in a report that is the audience, but that information might be years old, right? Sometimes I still receive audience breakdown from the project that I support. There are citing way to look at audiences that are coming from reports that they are being created in 2013, 2009. And we can argue that a few things have happened in between. And we can also argue that post-pandemic things got even weirdly different, right? So if you are referred into these pieces of information that are coming from somewhere in the industry, and that information is informing the way that you take decision, you really need to understand, is still a valuable information or not? So this is connected to, for example, one thing that I love, that is that we target people from the cities and we totally disregard people from outside. Like countryside feels like there's nobody living there, right? And for some reason that is a missed opportunities. Now, from a marketing distribution perspective, it can make sense. You have little money, you want to concentrate your resources in places where you have the highest amount of people with the least amount of effort. But we are giving away opportunities to really diversify our target audience if we always go like that. And for the same reason, if you look at class and level of education, we totally disregard people that are not high educated, and all my brainstorming with filmmakers are leading to people that look like they have to have a PhD level type of education, and they all are working in creative industry themselves, running art galleries and whatever. I'll talk about that later, but we are really, really pushing a certain type of audiences into like a mix of opportunities that is not taking into account that normal people don't have that type of education, but they still may be interested in the film that we are doing. Another one that I like a lot is when we look at audiences from afar. International market, like I'm coming from Italy, right? The sounding board for my people in the room when I had the workshop this week was myself for them. Like their film is supposed to travel outside of Brazil, and they don't know anything about people outside of Brazil. So it's important that we have a diverse group of people brainstorming around film, because otherwise it's like we are closing ourselves into this bubble and there is no information of what is going on outside. So it's me that don't know very little about your culture coming in and say, okay, that story might have a certain type of interest for my people too. But if you don't know anything about it, you better have someone that gives that type of information, right? Okay, I can go on and on, but you got the thinking around this. So we need to have a somehow understanding of where this information that we work on are coming from. And what is happening when we put AI into this context is AI is considered something that for some people, it's a black box, right? That's a metaphor. There is a data set that AI is being trained on that we don't have access to. We don't know where this information is coming. We can assume that chatbot more or less ingested the whole internet, sort of. Within that, there are information of any kind, right? But there also are many biases and stereotypes and prejudice that are coming from different countries. And they're all into this mix that we cannot open and look into that. But they're there. So if we are not aware of our own human biases, it's very hard to spot something that is automatically generated, that seems plausible, and that is very convincing in the way that is presented. Like, you don't have AI that says, I think that the audience for this film is this and that. No, you have AI that says, that's for sure the audience that you're looking at because this and that, right? And you take it for granted. Sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not. And you never know what it is if you don't double check, if you don't ask to someone else, okay, that's what I got. What do you think around that? And that's my point here. So you might have also this experience that when you're having conversation around films that maybe have sensitive keywords into that, or they have certain topics that are not sanitized, so to speak. My exercise with AI very often is providing different ways of wording synopses for films. And I push a little bit the type of keywords, I push the tonality, I want to understand what is the limit of it before it gets into guardrail mode, so to speak, before it starts to say, I cannot have this conversation with you. Because maybe there is, I mentioned mental health in the synopsis, and it feels like, oh, wait a second, I need to be double careful that this person that is asking me this stuff is maybe having a problem, so I have to be careful in the way that I respond to him. That also vice versa, of course, going like I'm casually speaking with AI and I start to speak to myself as if I am having issues just because I'm mentioning, a dynamic, a storyline within a film. So these problems with diversity is something that we feel like is changing a bit, but not at the pace that we will need. Like a few months ago, I could have tried to understand For example, if I wanted to create a synopsis for a film, what is AI doing for me, and what are the assumptions around the audience coming from? The normal personas that I was getting was someone who was living in the US, working as a programmer in Silicon Valley, with that amount of money at disposal to watch films, etc., etc. When I create a persona for art house films with that, I cannot really make anything of it in a European context. People like that don't even exist where I live. And if they exist, they have completely different traits. Like, things started to change a little bit with new release models, etc. So AI tried to localize this Anglo-Saxon, primarily American type of persona into an European context. Very clumsily. Still, my standard persona for an art house film that I was getting from ChatGPT was, instead of Alex Chen, was Paolo Russo from Italy, but still working in AI, still making a lot of money. That is not the case in my country. With all these biases and assumptions and data that were coming clearly from another place of the world, and they were being translated simply into a place that had no real connection, so to speak, from a social-cultural perspective, economic perspective, etc. So when you operate with that data and you have this information and you take that as an audience, that is clearly impossible to work with, because that's not reflecting how reality is in certain countries. So don't ever do this exercise without questioning the information that you're getting out of that. What we normally also see very often is that social media is also using AI in a way that is promoting things that feels bigger than what they are. And in these social bubbles, when you have recommendation systems that are providing you with, I think that you might like this film, and all your bubble reacts to that, it feeds back a sort of a conversation where a film that is, yes, meaningful, but not as big as it is presented, it feels like it's a blockbuster, but it's not. It's just your bubble reacting to this algorithmic suggestion. So we need to understand when we do, for example, something that is called in market sentiment analysis, and it feels like we need to understand how people are talking about films or topic, etc. And we go on social media and we try to understand how that happens. It feels like that everyone is talking about something, whereas it's just a bubble that is reacting to something. And if you are not able to contextualize it, you are taking this as a super successful conversation, whereas instead is a few hundred people talking about it, and it feels like the whole world is talking about it. But it's just because recommendation system works like that. And if you react to the content, you are fed for more similar content. And if you are not aware of this, you are going to see a version of reality that is only looking the way that algorithm wants you to look at it. Because you gave a couple of indications that you were interested into something, then it feeds you that thing forever and ever, until you try to break this sort of cycle, right? But for people like myself working with other human beings, that is super important to understand, because otherwise it feels it's a conversation between digital entities and not real people anymore. And that's a problem. Now, you can also do something like this when you are inputting your own biases into the conversation. Like, I don't know if you can read, but up there, I tried to ask ChatGPT in this case, why was City of God the best Brazilian film ever, so to speak? And he wanted to give me all these reasons why, without even asking me, well, maybe that's not the most important Brazilian film that we have. But I did that exercise with 5 different titles, and he gave me the same answer. So you see, the way that you prompt it, when you don't have someone or something that really asks, do you really feel about it? It's like taking this conversation for granted, and because AI wants to please you, it will never question the way that you ask them something. I invite you to do something like this for when you use it, and try to understand if there is any difference. I can have 20 exercises like that, and I always get this dynamic. It never wants to disappoint me, so to speak. The thing that I normally use at this moment is like I start to suggest a checklist that normally starts with you as a human being. And for example, to reflect about your gut feeling as opposed to your reaction to something that you never question why you react like that. So when you are exposed to a film trailer for a genre that you don't like, try to understand why you have this reaction, right? So your body tells you something, and of course it's processed through your brain. So we feel like, we call it gut feeling, but it's actually your brain that is process visceral reaction. It's always the brain that does the reaction. Even when we call it heart, gut, it's always processed up here, right? That is the first step that you can do. All these are just recommendations for free. You don't have to do anything. You just have to pay attention how you as human being react to stuff. Try to understand what are the biases that you are having towards something. Like in film, why are you reacting to certain stories? Why are you engaging more to characters, to settings, to keywords, to the way that they are presented? You will be exposed to the film later. Now, what I'm talking here is promotional materials, marketing assets, audience design ideas, a piece of trailer, a poster design, a message on social media about a film, even a review from someone else. Try to understand how am I reacting and why am I reacting to that. Common knowledge. When you start to have this type of thinking, you will realize that you spot your own biases, you spot your own shortcut, you spot your own reaction. Once you have that, you have a control way when you have conversation around audiences on a human side. And once you have on the human side, you can double check what is the machine doing within this conversation. Now you have to understand how the machine operates. How is this bias is packed into this conversation around a film that comes through a chatbot in that case? Is the chatbot trained on biases of its own? Is the chatbot trained on avoiding prejudice or not? Okay, now, examples, because I feel like everything is kind of theoretical at the moment. We still have time, right? Yes. That's the starting point of a persona. Like yesterday, if you were in the room, you saw a fully fleshed one, so to speak. You can have personas that are like 5 pages, 10 pages, full of information, etc. That's the demographic part for some. And more or less, that's the persona that I have from the film team that I work with. I give you like 10 seconds, no, 20 seconds, 30 seconds to familiarize with it for the next part of the conversation. Read what is in the slide, please. So the question that I have for you is this one. Does it sound authentic to you? Yes or no? Raise your hand if it sounds believable, sort of. I have a few timidly saying yes. For the other ones, you say that is not. Not, okay. Tell me why it's not. Can we have a mic for, hands here?
It looks like quite a cliche of the kind of we see in many movies.
I like that you use the word cliche, exactly. Another round of impression for why this is not really believable, yes?
But only 5 of them as an audience, so...
Yeah, it might exist, but very few people are looking like that. That's the same, yes. I have a question for the people who said yes, timidly say yes. Why does it sound a bit okay? Like, Alessia, tell me why it sounds a bit okay.
Because we are used to see people, and we know people that are pretty... Oh. Because we are used to see, I can know women in their 50s that go to exhibition or consume a lot of cultural products, so it makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think here it's a matter of perception, and you are sort of yes and right at the same time, all of you. Because we all can say that this person somehow we came across, we also see in our circle, if you are working in creative industries sometimes, we know people like this, right? The right objection here is, I know a few of them, but I wouldn't say that we can target 20,000 people like this. How many art curators are there in Berlin? I don't know. I mean, the exact point of a persona is something like this. It doesn't work as a universal tool. It works as a brainstorm tool. Like, I don't go to any of my partners with something like this saying, now we target this person, because they will come up with 10 names, sort of. We can reach out people like this. We can reach out through social media, PR, whatever marketing and promotional tools we want to use. But I mean, that's a tool. We are not really addressing 50 plus art gallery curator in Berlin as a audience. We want to have something like this to also represent cliché. If we understand that that's a cliché, then what is the next move? The next move would be, first off, understanding that is like a representation of a few people, that they might have different type of Linas in this case in the world, and some of them are totally into this very intellectual relationship with film, but some of them might also have a different interest in the same film. So we can target, so to say, it's a bad word, but we can target Lina in different ways. That is not just intellectually providing stimuli that are, you know, fit into the description. So what we mean by that is we correct the bias. Sorry, we correct the bias that we see here, because we understand that there is a bias that we are putting into the conversation. Like, we are trying to fit as a glove the audience into this macro category of people. Whereas if we want to try to have a way more diverse type of persona, still representing some Dinas, we can try to understand maybe the visual aspect of the film could be also something interesting, not just the intellectual part of the story. Maybe she has different, reason why to get into wanting to know more about the film. So we challenge also maybe the assumption that it's impossible for me that have maybe a more popular type of story to reach out to this person. Because if I am a filmmaker that is working on a popular theme, I don't necessarily have to give up to this type of intellectual people. I just need to understand that maybe they have reasons that can also be interested into that. Because if we operate like silos, and we say, that's only for art house, and that's it. So it's 20,000 people in Europe that is answering to this type of portrait, and everyone else is not interested in that. We are missing opportunities. Like, my message for today's talk is like, mix and match stuff much more, instead of really working with these categories as if they are really scientifically proven, right? The second that I can give you as an example is something that I like very much, because we are considering like documentaries based on social issues, and very often like the project that I work on in this past week was actually absolutely in this category, like an environmental project with social cultural implication, etc., etc. So I'll give you 30 seconds to understand Mathieu, and then we talk about that. Do you know people like Mathieu? Yeah, some of you? I know people like Mathieu, very few of them. Why? Because we are assuming, for example, that a person that is interested in social cultural, issues also has to be actively involved in making the world a better place, and not just experience it or documentary. Like, one of the objections that one person could have about this portrait is that, statistically speaking, numbers, how many people work in NGOs that also watch documentaries, that also go to protest in the city, like really into like bringing their own bodies into the street to do that, who also are on movie, who also are signing petition, etc., right? So I am more a qualitative type of person. If you go for a researcher that is a quantitative person, he will laugh at this. He will say, that's basically impossible to find all these traits into a person that is significantly statistically relevant for me to even consider to have a conversation around that, right? So, but yet again, because that's a tool, that's a thing to brainstorm, is not the law, is not set in stone, it's a starting point, right? So how do we go around this? So by the way, do you think this is a stock footage of a real person or AI generated, for example? Why is AI? Okay. Le monde diplomatique, oui, oui. It exists, but you know, yeah, exactly. It's like putting together, and even in images, like I was exposing you to all images that are generated by AI, just to make you aware that even the, you know, the way that visualize people are meaningful. Like nowadays is super important. Maybe you haven't even realized that there was a workshop picture that I used that everyone was like looking in the nothing with all the same expression sitting at a table, right? There's a presentation for Gemini, for example, for a workshop was that. And it was like unsettling, but normally when I use that in the context of a presentation, nobody has even noticed that, right? Only when I point it out specifically. So how can we engage Mathieu differently is, for example, to say that, okay, the brain works in a way that is super interesting. We have two systems, so to speak, and it's called dual system theory, the way that we look at that. And one is more reactive to impulses and stimuli. It has to somehow save your life if you're crossing the road and a car is about to eat you. The other one is much more reactive to intellectual things. It's much more slower in the way that it processes. So it's system one and system two. Like with people like Mathieu, for example, we always use facts, statistics, infographic information if there is a documentary that we feel like it might be interesting for such a person, because we think that is an intellectual person that wants to process that. Maybe that's not the case, right? So the thing that you can do in that case is like try to have a different approach to that and feed to people like Mathieu something that is also emotional, engaging. Use the characters of your film and not only the basic facts and figure for the documentary they are working on. Like I've worked on this documentary that was about a tragedy in this place, I mean in your country, and it was about providing the numbers, how many people died, what was the context of that, how many people in danger that are already there, what happened in terms of information, data, etc., etc. That makes a lot of sense for some people, but for other people that still are interested in documentary, they want to see the survivors, they want to see the community, they want to see, you know, the storylines, they want to see the emotional connection. So you can double down on this type of, you know, audiences by using system one and system two, so to speak. So what it means is you can create more promotional asset, diverse asset. You can still use data, but you can also use emotion, sounds, images, characters, people speaking over that, right? And so you can double check, you can always, for all the film, if you're working in promotion, I invite you to save a little bit of budget and have this type of double check system. Let's try to do something different with a little bit of our resources every time and see if we learn something, see if we can have a wider range of audiences on board, but just creating a different angle to engage them. That one, I love it because it feels like I am supposed to fit into the description. I am a super fan of horror. I'm Italian, and I am supposed to be represented by this one. Okay, so this is not even one of the most stereotypical one that I normally get when I ask a large language model to create portrait of people that love horror. They always are wearing T-shirt for their favorite films. They are in a room that is full of posters about everything that happened in the history of horror films. And it's a stereotypical representation. But I'm a super fan of horror. I never wore a T-shirt that says anything about it. And people, when I say that, oh, I didn't think about it. And the same, I'm a metalcore fan. People couldn't even think about it that I can listen to heavy metal. Just because they look at me, they don't see anything particularly saying that. But that's because we feel like we need to see, we need to find these clues to understand, we need to find stereotypes, for example. So now, this is somehow representing some of these horror, gore people that are existing somewhere, but not all of them, for example, are into video games. Like, I haven't played video games since I was in my teens. I'm 43 right now. But still, I can love a good horror film. I read manga here and there, not necessarily, but, you know, again, statistically speaking, that doesn't, you know, fit into many people. Now, the approach here is when we want to engage fans of specific genre, we can say, okay, what is the frame of presenting the film that we are selling? Frame meaning when we try to present a story, we create a frame around it. So we choose elements, and these elements are the ones that we use in marketing and communication. A frame could be, for this type of person, saying, the message will be, that's the horror that is taking TikTok by storm. Everybody is talking about it. A different frame would be, this is a elevated art house horror experience. And you see the difference there. Like, one is much more relying on what I told you before, herd behavior, social proof, and the other one is much more intellectually driven in the way that we can present information around that. Now, if you test approaches with this type of people, with a little bit of your resources, using, for example, A/B testing, providing different type of images, exposing them to different potentially type of poster design, you can collect reliable data rather than relying on, you know, perception and stereotypical biases against people like that. I think we are about to close, so we can have a few minutes for a final Q&A, but I wanted to leave you with that. And again, it's just basic understanding of how we operate as human beings. Like, the starting point for me to understand where these biases are coming from is, again, spotting themselves into the way that you are behaving already. So a deeper self-knowledge is the beginning of everything. Then you can translate that into knowing how machines operate. And then you can translate that into how your marketing and audience design and your audience development approach to increase your potential targets are operating. What it means normally is that you can have a more diverse marketing if you are aware that you have many different entry levels to all the type of audiences that you are considering. Instead of going for the traditional one, the cliche, and instead of going for the stereotypical ones. A more diverse marketing for me is the way that you speak to a more diverse type of audiences. Because one, we do audience design, one-to-one conversation is like, how is this piece of information that is wrapped around a marketing communication, a promotional asset, is meaningful for the audience that we are talking to? The starting point is this: you cannot have a diverse conversation with your audience if you don't have a diverse marketing approach, a diverse promotional ideas around how you can engage with these people. Otherwise, you're gonna have the standard stereotypical one, and that you will try to make it fit for 20 different type of audiences, just because you feel like that is, generally speaking, representing my audience, whereas it represents a corner of your potential board around audiences. I leave you with a question also that you want maybe to reflect upon, and that is this one. What assumptions and biases are shaping your work or your daily life? We can have a few minutes if you want, or you can think about it, and we can close it a little bit early. But if you have any question around anything, that's the moment when you can shoot it to me. Otherwise, obrigado for being here today. Floor is open. Oh, half of 1 year. Thank you.
I don't know, it's really unsorted thoughts, but I mean, I really love your presentations, and it's something we are really facing, how to deal with these machines in a dying market of cinema, at least from my perspective as a German producer who is in the field of art house, debut features. And for me, like an important question is like on the path to make films is the big financing and convincing step where you have like the expectations. Okay, what's your market approach? And you know, that's the moment when you need to start to lie and to be perfect and good in lying, because they have this sinus model. I don't know if you know it, like these sinus society bubbles. Then everybody works with AI, like as you mentioned, ChatGPT. So how do I approach best this convincing moment, like to deliver a marketing concept that involves like target audiences, role models of spectators, where you know it's completely unrealistic. It's like in the end, you know the reality might be this number and you just add 1 0 or even 2 zeros, and then you quote a film from decades ago because you can't find something contemporary. So how to find a model that with the hope in the end to convince financiers and commissions to rethink their approach on industry, but more on art, and in the end asking more for freedom. It sounds very confused, but it's something that really is something that affects me and where I have no answer on it, how to deal with it. I can play that role, but I feel it's fake. It's like fake with Lena, where we all know she exists like only 5 times and she probably doesn't go to cinema because she will be invited to the premiere to eat lobster and I don't know. Yeah, so.
Good point, exactly. But if you were yesterday here in the room, I would probably point out to what the final question was that Sheila was trying to answer to the similar question, like diversify. Try to create as many potential connections with these type of audiences as you can, because as you see, these are not statistically relevant and they're totally questionable, full of cliché and whatever. But people exist and people like film. It's just that we are operating to something that is a framework instead of operating with people. And the bridging moment would be we need to try to break out of that, to make it more relatable to normal people. Like in the example that we were making yesterday, the type of audience for the documentary I was working on in this workshop contest was the mother of one of the trainees that I had in my room. And it worked perfectly. We didn't have to invent anything. We even went to ask, would you like to watch it? Why is it interesting for you? Like we could have a market research on a small scale by that. When you operate on a number level, you don't have those opportunities and you operate on this assumption. Somehow I read a paper that says that this is the audience in my country, therefore that's what I'm inputting in the application form for the money that I want to get from the fund, because I read it, I don't have any other understanding of it, and I put it. And then hopefully someone will make sense of it. But on the receiving hand, they might have different data, different understanding. So the thing is that has happened is, as per when I started working in the film industry, it hasn't changed. We don't share information. We have, someone knowing things, someone creating reports. Reports are available. We don't read them. If we read them from different decades, and we take for granted that that is still valuable. There is a disconnection in between what we could learn from audiences and what we use as operational system. And this is also about, I heard somehow that Lina is representing me, and then I play the game, and then therefore is my application theoretical framework to work with. So the answer to the question would be try to break out of that and try to make a possible connection to real people, to cluster people, and showing that even for an application for a film that is supposedly to engage Lina, you can have 35 more type of different people that might have an interest for that. That requires a lot of thinking around the film first. Because what we do in audience design is the other way around of what you might think. We don't present type of audiences first. We start from the film and we do the other way around. Like we start from the story and from the elements that are there, and then we try to find out outside of it what is there. We not get into a room saying, oh, that's a film for, you know, super horror aficionados, and that's it. And it's the end of conversation. It's the other way around. We break it into as many people, as many pieces as possible, and we try to understand, are they overlapping? Can we challenge the notion of statistics when you have this type of stereotypical, you know, representation by, you know, showing that a person real existing has the same interest that this super high-hand educated person that we feel like is the person that we are going after. So again, it's a partial answer because there is no, at the moment, a shared understanding of it. But what I'm seeing is that we still work in silos, we still don't share information, even within the same, you know, bordering countries, not even on the other side of the world. Like if I throw you the question, what is the equivalent of Lina if I look at Tokyo as, you know, my market? Unless you're living there or you have a partner that knows the market, nobody knows. But people are requesting that you have these answers. And these answers sometimes are just based on, no, I think that I might maybe translate this, you know, Alex Chan into Italy and see if someone buys it. Someone buys it, someone not.
The assumptions, like for me, like the emotional, in those models and assumptions, I think for me, like the emotional quoting was a bit lacking. Like you stereotype, but I think people still function very much by like searching belonging and identification. Like we function still more on an emotional level.
That was much more demographic in the way that I presented the data, and psychographic is way more useful, if you ask me. Like if I have to provide you interesting reflection point would be go for emotion, try to establish this connection within the story rather than saying, okay, that's a story for a person that has 25 years old. What does it mean if 25 years old is Italy as opposed it is Africa, as opposed it is like Norway? That changes everything, right? If you go for demographic tells you very little things, whereas emotions are much more interesting because then you can have the connection, maybe.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a way to look after, like to how to bundle that, how to bring it on paper, like in a concept.
Yeah. I mean, I use on purpose this, you know, demographic thing because it's obvious to almost everybody. There is a sort of a cliche, but as something that normally in the conversation that I have with my film team, that's the starting point. We always go for age, places, and urban educational level, etc., because we feel like that's what people are, you know, secure to provide you. When we start to talk about feelings, oh, that's a different conversation. Yes.
Thank you, and thanks, Nicola, for the presentation. Sort of building off from some of Harry's thinking, how much does the behavior of how audiences actually consume film goes into this work? Because sometimes we have this bias as sort of creators, you know, cinema feels like the thing that's sort of stuck in all of our minds, right? Ideally, we are like, but we know that in reality, our films won't play theatrically massively. Sometimes probably wouldn't get on Netflix. So how does the behavior of how audiences watch films, especially the kind of films that maybe we're trying to, how does that factor into how you then model the intervention? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's super interesting because that is exactly when we start to move from the data to sort of a universal connection to the story. And that's why audience design is story-driven. We need to understand, okay, what is this, rather than just that is playing into factor. Like you have whole disciplines about that. You have these, for example, are coming a little bit, this content from behavioral science, and particularly behavioral economics, that is looking through the way that psychology and economics plays together in the decision that we make. Like, for example, what is the factor that allows me to pick a film on Netflix? Is because of the color of the visual asset that the algorithm is showing me, is because of the 2 lines of story that I'm reading, is because of the line that I'm seeing the content on, and on, right? So you can have this lens through the whole analysis that you do. Some people also can use neuroscience nowadays, which is a slightly different approach, but to say we are going away from simple data set that are sort of that number only, to emotions and to how brain works and to how we take decisions. So it's psychology, it's a little mix of stuff. It's really even the substances that our brain release when we hear a music in the trailer, we hear an emotional storyline, and we don't even know how we process this information, but that's exactly what neuroscience does. Now, an extremely advanced way to do that, for example, is using neuroscience and neuromarketing to test assets. Like, you fit into a room, you, of course, search partners that know how to do that, and you play a trailer when you analyze your brain reaction. So it's not about anymore a questionnaire at the end of it for a focus group that asks you, what did you like more? Did you like the relationship between the characters? What is that, what's driving you? It's like your brain is already giving the answer. There is not even anymore the need for a question. It's like we analyze how your brain processes stuff, the substances that you release, and we got that. You like that because your prefrontal cortex, whatever it is, the part that ignites the reaction, is the area of pleasure, for example, or is the area of fear. That's very advanced, but so to speak, we're already stepping away from just saying, it's 25 years old. Get in, get out.
With all of that was said, we should use AI for thinking about audience design, because it looks like we use because it's easier, but not because it's better.
Exactly. I mean, if you use wisely AI, that is the best combination ever. If you use it because you're lazy, sort of, that's the worst case scenario. But if you're smart with it, you can have, instead of just input-output, a copilot with you. Like, that's one of the terms I use to sell it, the thing, a copilot. It can be a copilot if you are engaging with it, and if you're not just saying, that's the question, and that's the answer, and I'm off. And you go out, right? But you can push it way more. Then you have, of course, that's a ChatGPT sort of version, that's a bot, but you can have agents that are way more effective nowadays. Agents can provide you 300 pages of research, and instead of giving you 15 links, 10 links, they give you 300. Now it's up to you know what to do with those, right? Either you blindly take it, or you go through that and you understand, okay, that's useful. And instead of having me and 3 other people in the room wasting 3 days to get the same information, I got it in 15 minutes. But that's the starting point and not the end point. Like, if you are becoming lazy, then of course we understand what is going to happen. Like, we take everything and then, is it true, is it not? You're going to discover months later when you are deploying a marketing campaign that all the assumption that you got based on this brainstorm was totally wrong. But if you use it with your own brain very much working and you apply it to the capabilities of AI, that's the perfect way to do that. Yeah. Okay, I think we have to wrap it up, right, Linda?
Yes.
Lydia, sorry.
No.
Or my brain is gone.
You've been talking for a long time. Thank you very much, Nicolo. Thank you all also for being here. In a few minutes, in about half an hour, we'll have a coffee break in the business center. So if you're still around, you're welcome to join. And then at 3 p.m., we have another debate here about short films. So if you are producing short films and interested in short films production and distribution, please come by. We're going to have some representatives from film festivals and also a sales agent to talk about the distribution of short films. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much. Obrigado.